I'm Alexander. My sons and I work here. No one tours this place.
I thought the keep was unoccupied.
You wouldn't emphasize tours. No one tours this place.
No one tours this place.
I thought the keep was unoccupied.
Actors bringing images to life, a life translated from another writer's work. It's a very different type of drama from any previously filmed by Michael Mann.
Now, don't get sucked into his rhythm.
Yeah, quite. That's
Okay, so
right.
if he starts going fast, nothing.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
your
yeah.
rhythm is as rock solid as his place. Nothing shakes, you know.
I wanted to do something very expressionistic and wanted to get into a dream and have things be as highly stylized and expressionistic as they are sometimes in dreams, and also to try and get the dramatic power that that people seem to have in a dream, that a character has. When you're frustrated in a dream, you are really frustrated, and you can't get out of that locked into the same repetitive movement. You can't stop running, or you can't run fast enough. Or when there's passion in a dream, it has a vividness and a color that's almost beyond reality. And when there's aggression, and in other words, those kinds of feelings, and the kind of feelings that people have in dreams, which is what, after everything that Jung and Freud and everybody wrote about dreams, I mean, it's definitely it's an expression of things that are repressed in your normal life. So it's unconscious urges, unconscious desires in their raw power emerge in the dreams.
Mann's record as a filmmaker is as uncompromising as his single-minded approach to the craft. His sense of adventure, to avoid the cliché daring, also inspires a preference for subjects that other, more cautious or commercially minded colleagues might choose to reject.
Keep appealed to me because it seemed as if it could be moved out of the horror genre, which is very definitely what the novel was, into something else. The something else is, in fact, a dream. And there's very distinct differences between the two genres. And the horror genre scares, and that's mostly what it does. And in most horror films, there's attempts at explanation of where non-natural events came from. You attempt to explain cause, usually in some bad pseudoscientific way. Even the Frankensteins. And in dreams, those things aren't explained. They're just there with amazing power. And part of the power is because causes aren't explained. So there are some unnatural events and unnatural entities in the keep, and specifically what they are and specifically where they came from aren't explained because they're states of mind.
What are you doing here?
I'm the caretaker, sir.
And they?
They are my sons. There's 108 such crosses made of nickel embedded in the walls of the keep.
You counted them? Or is it something that two customers?
I'm Alexander. My sons and I work here. No one tours this place.
Michael Mann's interest in filmmaking was well rooted in survival at college.
I was attracted to the craft of filmmaking because they offered a course in which I was going to get 3 credits for looking at movies. So I signed up for that one like I was in there like a shot. I mean, I had absolutely zero interest in making movies prior to that. I was an English literature major, and they started the first film history course. So I thought, terrific, I'll go there, get 3 credits looking movies, it'll be great. And prior to that, the only, I used to go to the Terminal Theater or something in Chicago when I was a kid because you can smoke in the balcony and it was dark. I mean, that was the reason for going to the movies. So when I was 21, I took this film history course as a lark, along with astronomy, geology, and of course on Henry James and James Joyce. And I went in and took this thing, and all of a sudden I started seeing the street films of Pabst from the 20s, Murnau, the German Expressionists, Eisenstein, Pudovkin, and I was swept away. And it's one of the few times in my life like the skies parted and letters of fire come down and say, "You got to do this, Jack," you know, and that's what happened.
The Chicago-born filmmaker chose to learn the basics of his craft at a film school in London. The perception that's become the hallmark of his work was developed on the streets of every town.
Did a film on Paris during May and June of '68 when that went up for grabs. That had a big influence on the way I think about things, about themes and content. And I did another film that affected me, which was A Journey Across the United States in 1971. There were a number of films made of guys who hadn't been in the United States for one reason or another for 6 years, and I was one of those. And then I came back. It was very much a journey home. And myself and a friend of mine who was a Newsweek correspondent who was based in London named Marvin Kupfer, who I used on camera some of the time, just got in the car with a couple other guys, and we just drove all across the United States in '71, just shooting whatever we ran into. Now, if you did that today, you'd have a very boring film. If you did it in 1971, it's another story. Because you pull into Albuquerque and discover that the VA hospital there has got a lot of Vietnam wounded. And so you'd go into Albuquerque for that, and a Chicano riot would break out, and there'd be 4 people shot to death, and you'd find yourself filming right in the middle of it, which is what happened to us. Or you'd find yourself in Taos, New Mexico, in a VFW convention, Veteran of Foreign Wars convention that happened to be held there, and they were the first veteran organization that came out against the war in Vietnam in '71, and you'd find yourself talking to a beekeeper in Quartzsite, Arizona, and the man would wax poetic. I mean, there was an incredibly tense period. All you had to do was drive just about anywhere, and you'd collide with people and events. When you start doing documentaries and you start shooting real people talking, and you turn a camera on them and you get a certain sense of spontaneity, you start appreciating the fabulous richness and the texture and color and rhythms of language that you encounter on the street, and so it develops your ear. So I've got a box full of fragments of dialogue that I may have overheard in a bar, and I write it down on a cocktail napkin. I never lose dialogue. I never lose words, a turn of phrase. So it sharpens your ear for that. So it really applied, the documentary stuff really applied more to the writing than anything else. And the commercials were something, after I did commercials for a while, I shied away from them. Because for me, I felt it was taking me into an area of stylism, which is kind of it's off on a tangent away from form, and it's got nothing to do with content. So it's, I mean, when content atrophies and you're just left with form, it degenerates into stylism. And that's very personal and subjective, because a friend of mine who I consider one of the great filmmakers of this decade, Ridley Scott, obviously has a terrific background in commercials, so it's a very subjective reaction to commercials. But I did a short film at one point, which for me was a very conscious stylistic exercise. I felt I didn't know anything about color, I didn't know anything about shapes, I didn't know anything about photography. Where I grew up in Chicago, if you had a camera, it wasn't too cool, so I didn't have any visual training at all. And so I designed, as an exercise for myself, one short film that was severely abstract, so that it couldn't have language or people in it. It was just shape and color and music. And I think I worked out a lot of my attitudes now about what I do with a camera in montage, just for making that one film.
Such exercises rarely excite Hollywood's rulers, but the gambling instinct isn't totally lost.
I don't think the world of commercial cinema is cautious. Most of the people who I know who do it take incredible chances. They're some of the all-time great gamblers. They gamble with their if their lifestyle's important to them, if the amount of money that they make, if security's important to them, they gamble with that to the same degree as, you know, the biggest high roller in Vegas. They'll decide to make a movie like Pennies from Heaven, for example, which is an incredible risk. And if it doesn't work, your career's in big trouble. And I don't know anybody who hasn't taken those shots or taken those chances. They're playing with very, very big stakes.
We'll hear how the young American played the cards he was dealt in a minute or two. When the time came for Michael Mann to join the commercial school of filmmaking, with characteristic self-assurance, he joined the toughest game in town, episodic television. One of his opening hands was Starsky and Hutch.
To meet David Soul and Paul Michael Glaser after the pilot was shot and before the first episodes were on the air, to hear their beat on what that show was supposed to be was quite exciting in 1975, because you were going to have two counterculture, irreverent cops with a lot of wit, a lot of innuendo, a lot of American phrase and pull a lot of English on the ball. You know, there's going to be a lot of spin on the ball. And so I wound up writing the first two or three, I think the first, second, and fourth episodes that were ever aired of the show. And they were good scripts, and it was a lot of fun to write them with these guys. But the rigors of making episodic television are brutal, and you have 5-6 days to shoot an episode, an hour episode. And so the production values have to get cut off, and there's no time. And so what happened is that the production, I always had the feeling that there was maybe potentially twice in each one of those hour scripts that was realized on the screen. And the two guys also got demoralized. But the fun about doing episodic television was that it was fast. You'd get an idea, you'd write it in 2 weeks. 3 months later, it's on the air. The structure, because of commercials, is 4 acts. You have about 4 or 5 scenes to an act. It moves. And if you set it up like an episodic novel like Tom Jones and structure your episodes, you get to move through a lot of bizarre, funny places. So the first one I did was a takeoff on a car salesman who's famous in L.A., who gets on a television set riding rhinoceroses in a cowboy hat in front of his used cars, Cal Worthington. And there was a takeoff on Cal Worthington. And something else to take off on something else, so it was funny stuff. And the series hit real big. And that allowed me then to move to what at the time was the Rolls-Royce of episodic television in the United States, which was Police Story. Not Policewoman, but Police Story. And I don't know if any of those ever came over here. It was an anthology, so there's no continuing characters. And myself and about 3 or 4 other guys wound up writing 2 years of the show. And I was the new kid on the block when I came into it. The other guys were, like Eric Bercovici, for example, who wrote Hell in the Pacific with Toshiro Mifune, and I forgot his name. Lee Marvin. And just did Shogun as a producer and writer. And at that time, these were people who were paid 6, 7, 8 times as much as was paid to do an hour of Police Story, to be writing pilots, but they'd come back to write Police Story because Police Story was the only place in American television you could do really quality writing. And 1 out of 3 of those episodes was terrific. And it was produced by Liam O'Brien, who wrote Trapeze and was a hard-drinking Irish, slightly left-of-center intellectual from New York. And it was a terrific show. Joe Wambaugh was heavily involved in it. And so I did some of that. One of the episodes I wrote won an Emmy for... I didn't win the Emmy. The episode won an Emmy for that year. And then from there, I wound up writing 1 television pilot, which became Vegas. And then I decided I wouldn't write any more television unless I could direct. So writing for me very much was a ticket into directing, or was leverage to get into directing, to get me to the point. Well, because in television in the United States, writing, the writer has a tremendous amount of power, because it's the thing in shortest supply. And that's why so many producers, successful television producers, started off as writers. And so for me, writing was something I backed into. And when I achieved a modicum of success in it within the commercial world, my intent was to use it as leverage to be able to do what I wanted to do, which was to direct. So after I wrote the Vegas pilot, I told ABC I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't write any more stuff unless I could direct it. So we found a movie of the week to direct, and that was Jericho Mile.
The film's study of black and white communities in jail and the scenes of thigh-aching, lung-bursting races redeem a tendency to lapse into simplistic moralizing.
Suggested one reviewer of the story about a prison inmate who seeks mental release from his life sentence through athletics. Another commentator, writing in The Guardian, was more direct.
Watch out for Michael Mann. He is going places. Impeccable narrative drive, a way with caricatures that almost persuades one that they are characters, and a very good idea of how to turn incipient melodrama into drama are each evinced in turn here.
And it was shot in 21 days for $1.1 million inside Folsom Penitentiary. And that was an experience. I guess the documentary work I had done related to that in a big way, because it had to be, the production of it had to be designed so that I could grab stuff as it happened. We had from 9 to 5 every day, no overtime. At 5 o'clock, a bell rung. The guards came out with their Ruger Mini-14s, these rifles, and we were gone. There was no, wait a minute, I got one more setup. I mean, it was a very violent atmosphere to try to make a movie in. We had 13 stabbings and 1 killing happen right during the middle of our shooting, right around us, because we were shooting within the mainstream prison population, right on the yard. Folsom is the maximum security prison in the whole California penal system. So if you get into trouble in San Quentin and kill a couple of people, they then send you to Folsom. And so it was very tough. But once you got used to it, for myself and the actors, it was fabulous, because you're making a movie about a subject, and now you were living within the subject. And there was what an actor would pick up from some of the convicts that they were spending their days with, is a convict doesn't pick up a pack of cigarettes. Convict had, in Folsom, a guy had an attitude about how he picked up a pack of cigarettes. So all the little detail that you start layering on, detail after detail after detail, starts building up a simulacrum of reality, and all that does is make the film incredibly believable and authentic appearing to an audience.
The Thief was Mann's next film. It's perhaps best summed up by a reviewer for The Times.
The film is an extension of Mann's first TV feature, The Jericho Mile, which used actuality to penetrate the state of mind of a life prisoner. Here we follow the fate, on the outside, of another state-raised man.
A writer in The Observer tempered his complimentary review with a word or two of advice.
All he needs to do now is temper his modish detachment with a little moral sense.
You develop within yourself methods of how you penetrate into a world that doesn't want to know about you. They don't want to talk to you. They're not impressed that you come from Los Angeles, that you're from United Artists or Paramount Picture Corporation. They could really care less. They have no reason to talk to you. They're very disciplined people who lead very quiet lives on the surface. And you develop techniques to gain confidence, to gain access, and to penetrate into that and find out about it. And because Thief is so reality-based, that makes it similar to Jericho Mile, in the sense that Thief was the story of a man who was Frank, who lived that life and appears in the movie as Sergeant Uritzi, whose man's name is John Santucci. And there's 6 or 7 major thieves who play acting roles in the picture. There's about another 6 or 7 heavy-duty detectives who I have mostly playing thieves in the picture. All the techniques that are used in the picture, all the technology is all real. But that's the easy part. What's the hard part is to find out what a guy like John Santucci or Frank, played by Jimmy Caan, how he feels about his wife. That's more difficult. That's also more interesting. How he feels about his family. What would make him leave his family? Because some of these guys will live with their family for 14 years, and one day they're coming home and there's an unmarked car in front of their house, and they'll just keep going. and they'll never come back. And the wife's not, maybe the wife will hear from him the kids will hear from him in 2 years. I mean, that's how cold some of these guys are. Or what backgrounds, what causes that kind of pathological mentality. That's the more interesting stuff. And that takes a long time, digging and spending time with these people to get. But both those pictures were reality-based, and then, stylized in the photography and the art direction, and also in the characterizations.
No one stays the night.
Ghosts, demons.
No ghosts here.
The Keep takes Michael Mann into a new and challenging area, an area for which, one senses in talking with him, he was searching.
The appeal for me was to do something that had the power to evoke very strong emotions in people from inside. Appeal to the unconscious, appeal to the inner being, as opposed to like a myth or a fable, which are overt and behavioristic and appeal from the outside. So that was the reason why I got interested in basically in doing the Keep.
You cannot stay here.
And why not?
No one stays here.
And who forbids it?
No one forbids. Some travelers have stayed. We don't stop them, but no one stays the night.
Ghosts, demons.
No ghosts here.
Death, then. Suicides.
No one's ever died here.
And what drives people out in the middle of a rainy night?
Dreams.
Nightmares. Oh, man. The real nightmares man has made upon other men in this war. The bad dreams of your Keep are nursery rhyme by comparison.
It is my duty, Herr Officer, to warn you. No lodgers stay in the Keep.
Consider your duty faithfully discharged. Now I want it to...
As streetwise as any of his contemporary colleagues, Michael Mann appears to know exactly where he's going. Despite its inherent dangers, the Keep is part of his journey.